Luca.
More impact, more inclusive approaches to create that collective impact. And the panel that has been curated today is a true reflection of the pluralistic actors that have a preoccupation, a role, and an engaged energy in not only the philanthropy world, but in the business of creating positive, lasting, sustained impact. We have several questions to get through. We have about an hour and 20 minutes, and we're going to hopefully open it up for questions as well. Quite a number of topics have been discussed over the course of these 3 days that relate to this subject. Talking about risk, talking about crowding in other actors, talking about transforming philanthropy. I've seen a lot of Lego pieces around that have been invoking the image of a mirror and being a bit self-critical around how we can create, how we can really lean into that enabling role that philanthropy can play. So with that, several questions to my panelists today, and my thanks in advance for joining us in this conversation. Sumachi, the Tomi Elumelu Foundation has been doing some outstanding work in youth entrepreneurship across the continent of Africa, and I really want to start with the energy of private philanthropy in this space, and wondering if you can share with us practical collaborations that you've been involved in that have achieved significant collective impact. And also, we're in the business of failures. This is a very safe space. Chatham House rules apply well beyond the compounds of the Radisson Blu. There's a failure lab upstairs, which I had a chance to visit. And so, successes and failures, please.
No, thank you so much, Reyes. As the CEO of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, the largest philanthropy in Africa, empowering young African entrepreneurs, I'm extremely delighted to be here. And as Reyes has said, I've also been in some plenary sessions, and the learning and the collaboration and the insights, I think that it's, second to none. And as he said, I've been to so many conferences, but I'm very energized by the honesty and transparency and the dialogue in this room. So at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, we empower African entrepreneurs because we believe that to transform Africa, we must economically empower our young ones. We must help them to start and to scale small businesses that do three things in a nutshell. One, help us to eradicate poverty on the continent in a meaningful, long-term fashion, where we don't take autonomy from beneficiaries, but then beneficiaries are able to start businesses, grow those businesses with dignity. The second thing is that we want to create more jobs on a continent. Jobs will not be created by governments or corporates or big businesses. It is SMEs that will empower our continent to create the millions of jobs needed each year for the young people joining the labor force. And then the third thing is that we want to economically empower our young people and our women. For too long, we think that women have been marginalized. For too long, we think that women have not been empowered enough to achieve their highest economic potential. So the work that we do in funding entrepreneurs, training entrepreneurs, mentoring, coaching, giving them access to digital and physical markets is what we believe will catalyze transformation on the continent. And speaking to collaboration, we started our Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program in 2015, and it was born out of a $100 million commitment by our founder, Mr. Tony Elumelu, and his family. But very quickly, we realized that we couldn't play this game on our own. For instance, in the first year of our applications, we opened it up to the entire African continent, so applications from all 54 African countries poured in, and we wanted to only fund 1,000 entrepreneurs a year. In that year alone, we received over 20,000 applications. Last year, those applications have grown to 400,000 applications in each year. So if we're only funding 1,000, then we're in the business of dashing hope instead of creating hope, and that's not what we want to do. So we quickly opened up for collaboration, and today, some of our biggest partners include the European Union, the United Nations Development Program, the German Development Agency, and a host of other development agencies around the world. And together we've now funded 18,000 entrepreneurs. They've gone on to create over 400,000 jobs across all 54 African countries. These entrepreneurs have generated $2.5 billion in revenue in only a few years, but we couldn't have done this without partnerships, right? Meaningful collaborations with like-minded stakeholders. And last thing, speaking to the business of failure, I think that over the years, we're not stuck to one model. So we learn and we iterate and we listen. I think many times philanthropic actors are very concerned about their goals and their own agenda, but it's very important to listen to the last mile, right? If you want to empower entrepreneurs, you have to bring them to the room as decisions are being made, as the program model is being refined, as we're thinking around how to best measure our impact, our results, to generate new research, new insights. We need to bring those entrepreneurs in a room, and we need to be honest with ourselves. What's working, what's not working? How do we divert capital to more effective sectors to give us more jobs, more poverty eradication, etc.? So, last thing I'll say before I hand over back to you, Reyes, is I think that, for philanthropy in our world today to improve, we need more sessions like this. We need more dialogue where we can share best practice, where we can share, I had this idea, it didn't go as well, I think we should refine and pivot to this other thing, and instead of replicating the same programs with different actors, we can collaborate and scale for even more impact.
Smachi, thank you, and truly commend the journey that your foundation's been on, picking up elements of self-reflection, honesty, keeping in mind the primary stakeholder in the formula, and being really honest about the challenge in front of you, and needing a lot more hands around the table. Abdi, you represent Absa Bank, a bank that is quite famous in Kenya and beyond, and known for its work in philanthropy as well. We were remarking the Pwani Innovation Festival is happening in Mombasa, and a colleague of mine sent photos, and in the background, without fail, it was covered in Absa Bank marketing. Sponsorship at the community level is something I often associate with Absa Bank. Abdi, collaboration, banks, looking at the role of philanthropy for collective impact, how does a bank view this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, Reyes, thanks. Before I came here, I was speaking at Safaricom. Today is launching their sustainability report. The topic there as well was about collaboration and partnership. And together with two other banks, we've partnered to do a sustainability-linked facility for Safaricom. That's the largest that has ever been done in this market. So that's one end of the scale, where you are looking at how to solve these complex issues that we face, but resolve them at scale. And then, of course, on the other end, you have those individuals who are engaged in philanthropy directly or at a community level, and small organizations that are making a difference. And this is the beauty of this space, is that each and every one of those levels is required. And I think the word there is collaboration and partnership, and how we work on it together. This space is becoming more and more, important as we move along. And certainly in our bank, we no longer look at CSR or philanthropy as something you do on the side. So you report your financials and everything, and then you talk about what you have done for the community. It's a very integrated part of the strategy. It's an integrated part of what we do. The Elumelu Foundation talked about the SMEs. That's a big piece that we're looking at that has an impact beyond business, especially when you introduce the gender agenda, and we work with women-led businesses, and we've had amazing experiences, not just here in Kenya, but across the continent. In fact, quite recently, a number of women business people from Kenya went to attend a conference under Absa's support that we did in Accra, Ghana, and it was a continent-wide type of conference. So this gender piece is very, very important for us, and it's something we believe will make a difference. And then in there, you also have the whole piece around environment, which is another complex problem that all of us are dealing with. And you know, for businesses that tick the right boxes within that space, I think that's another area that we spend a lot of time on. But, you know, I guess you said the failures, right? I think as an industry, as a financial sector, we need to start looking at this space differently. My daughter, who lives in Dubai, with her friends, run a small community entity, and they do a lot of work here in Nairobi, and they make a difference at a very community-based level. You know, when you look at it from a corporate perspective, you might not see it as big impact, but they are really having an impact at that level. And for me, the question I pose to myself and people of my generation is, how do we deal with the younger group of people that is coming in that have a different way of looking at philanthropy and the way things should be done? And especially when you look at it also in the context of technology, which is really democratizing this space and exposing more people to what we are doing. So I think for me, the way I look at it is the path to success, and this is a journey, you know, there is no finishing line here, but that path must go through collaboration and partnership and really working together across the large-scale entities, state organizations, NGOs, etc., and how we pull together. In our Ghana business, we've partnered with MasterCard to do some very good work there. You know, we are setting up a foundation here in Kenya that will be looking for similar partnerships. I know USAID does a lot of good work in this space as well. So how we put the whole ecosystem to play, I think, is what will create sustainability for us.
Abdi, thank you for that. And you know, just to pick up a couple of points. One, CSR is not a side hustle for Absa Bank.
Yeah.
This is core rooted in the business model. And a number of topics around you know, being very focused on particular issues, and just want to echo that point around being very community grounded and minded around how we're ushering in collective impact. Hélène, you work for, my Canadian French stopped at grade 9, so Agence Française du Développement. And Portuguese is marginally better. Hélène, from a DFI perspective, you're working with a variety of different actors on a daily basis. Where do you see philanthropy's role in ushering in that collective impact?
Well, thank you very much, Riaz, and good morning to all. Rather, almost good afternoon. I think we all realize that, you know, the way things are going, we will never get where we want to go by working all in silos. So, you know, I was in a room earlier, and I was saying that when I started working, you know, I was working with governments, and then we started working with the private sector, and then we ended up working now with the Philanthropys, and I was saying we need to add a P because that would be the people's P. And so when we reach that one, then we would probably have rounded and everything. And so where we stand in working with philanthropy, I mean, apart from the financial part, which we may probably come back to, is definitely the agility. I think what you said demonstrate that. I mean, look at my mic and look at her mic. You know, obviously there is something. I'm having this big mic and she's having the very fancy mic to speak with. So you can see the innovation already, right? Innovation, agility. No, seriously, I think there is this agility, there is the lack of processes, the lack of procedures, the very bulky ways of working, which actually we cannot go without because, you know, we're working with taxpayers' money and we have to do this accountability to the taxpayers. So there is no way out. But you have a flexibility and a way of working that is very key for us. That's the first thing. The second thing is definitely the knowledge of the environment in which you're working. Even if we've been for some of us, working in some countries for dozens of years, we will never know the communities as well as people from that community because we're outsiders. And so being outsiders, we cannot, have that in-depth knowledge. I was listening to one panelist earlier, I don't know if he's in the room, Frank, who was saying that, the people of the community would be the first people to know what they need for their own community. So I think that's also very key for us to say, to be demand-driven rather than offer-driven. It's like, this is what we want to do, are you interested type of thing. Rather than people saying, okay, let's sit, talk, and see what we can do because this is what we need. And it's a totally different conversation. The third issue is, of course, the way that you have of doing business and the agility that one may have, and the agility that we can scale upon. You've talked about failures. We're a bit risk adverse, so going and explaining to our taxpayers that we've tried something, it didn't work, and oops, we're sorry, might not fly. So working with people who are ready to take that path and take it to scale when it has worked is definitely helpful. And then probably the last point is that the collaboration actually multiplies, and I think you proved that point quite well, multiplies the effect of financing. That is, if philanthropies, and this is exactly what you were saying, if philanthropies come with, let's say, 100 million, and you decide to invest your 100 million, great. But if you leverage other people's money, if you leverage the private sector, if you leverage the multilateral banks, if you leverage the bilaterals, then you're ending up with a basket which is going to be fuller. And this is what we do, and so there's a lot of ways of doing it. You can finance the studies, we can put the risk capital, we can co-finance, we can blend the money, make the interest rates, quote unquote, sweeter, so that, there may be more and more money to achieve the ultimate goal, which is, developing and helping the people out. So that's basically it. There is, of course, a lot of other things that we could talk about, but in terms of the state of mind, etc., I'll stop it.
Hélène, thank you. I think picking up on various points, taxpayers have a voice, certainly, and they're an important shareholder and stakeholder in this often. And there's a variety of different shareholders and stakeholders that we ought to consider when we think about how we crowd in multiple actors. The point about local knowledge, and if I can build on that by acknowledging the humility to understand that you need local knowledge to begin with. And I think we need to quote this, being offer-driven as opposed to demand-driven. I think that's a fundamental paradigm shift that we all need to reflect on. Ambassador Whitman, thank you so much for joining this panel. You've been hearing already a variety of different variables, considerations. Now, how do we actually invest in the infrastructure that creates these meaningful partnerships from your perspective?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join this very distinguished panel. I'm delighted to be here with all of you. And most of you probably know my background is more in the private sector. I'm new to government. I've been in the government for about a year. So my comments will reflect that mix of points of view. I would say a couple of things before I get to the infrastructure question. I want to say thank you to everyone in this room, because I think before I became an ambassador, I did not have a sense of the philanthropy at work in Africa, at work in Kenya, not only USAID, but many of you here. And I would say the world would be a very different place if it was not for all of you in this room. Indeed. And I want to thank you for that. I would say we have a challenge coming up. And I can speak for Kenya. that all the work that the philanthropists in Kenya do, and there's a lot of philanthropy in Kenya, there's a lot of government support, there's a lot of private sector support from places like Absa Bank. However, if we keep doing what we're doing for the last 10 years, if we keep doing that for the next 10 years, by definition, we are going to be falling very dramatically behind. Because you know that statistic that 1 in 4 people on Earth will live in Africa in 2050, and 1 in 3 working age people will live in Africa in 2050? So if you back into that and say, what does that mean for Kenya? It means that Kenya will go from 55 million people to 110 million people between now and 2050. And so if we just have the same amount of money, and by the way, I don't see money increasing that much in philanthropies and from government. In fact, I think from government it's probably going to go down around the world. If we don't change the way we're doing this, we are by definition falling behind against that backdrop of tremendous population increase. And I have a couple of theories about this. One is, can we invest in infrastructure that is designed to aid collaboration or crowding in, as you just said? And so I think there's some things we can do there. But I still think a lot of this collaboration is done the old-fashioned way. When I first came to Kenya, I invited the 10 largest philanthropists or foundations to come to dinner at my house, along with USAID. And just that personal connection, first of all, a lot of the heads of the different foundations had never met each other. And that started a collaboration that was not tech-based, it was human-based. And I still think there's a huge role for personal connections, shared values, mission. The other thing I would say is, I think that we collectively, the private sector, the public governments and philanthropies, we can benefit from focus. Let's say that education is one of the things that we're all interested in. We know the education attainment of every single county in Kenya. And some of them are at 36% completion of 6th grade, some are at 92% of completion of 6th grade. But if you do not graduate from 6th grade in this day and age, I think your opportunities are limited. What if we crowded into those counties with the lowest and said, we're going to go from 36% to 82% in 5 years. We're going to put all our expertise, all our money, all our focus to really see if we can move metrics by a lot. Not just 36 to 38 or 40, but we're going to really move these metrics. And I think by focusing on a challenge, focusing maybe on a geography, I am a big believer that by focusing and working together, we can make a bigger difference than we've made before. I'll give you another example. Hospitals. There are a number of ghost hospitals in Kenya. What I mean by ghost hospitals is the hospital got built, but there's no beds, there's no medical equipment, and there's no doctors and nurses. So I'm not quite sure exactly how that happened, but you all can imagine. What if we all said, we're going to tackle ghost hospitals in Nakuru County? We're going to get together. USAID doesn't do medical equipment, but some of you do. What if we all said, we're going to solve this problem of ghost hospitals in one county and work together with each of our expertise, work with the government, work with the foundations, work with USAID. I think we would make more change faster, which then could be best demonstrated practices for the next county with ghost hospitals. So that's how we're thinking about this. And I think it's infrastructure in some ways, but it's more personal connection and deciding what we're going to try to do together. And the challenge that I see, at least in Kenya since I've been here, is there's tremendous resources, but everyone gets a little and no one gets enough. And I think would be better off if we said we're going to give this geography or this problem or focus to see if we can't make really big, measurable change above and beyond what we have done in the last 10 years, because it's not going to be good enough in the next 10 years.
Ambassador Whitman, thank you. And just to attest, that dinner was delicious. So thank you again for that. I think, bringing up the human connection, absolutely right. And I think that reinforces the role of Philanthropy Support Organization, WINGS as well. And this point around a number of people get some, but not enough. And I just canvassed the crowd here and saw a lot of this. So clearly we're hitting a trigger here. I think there's a lot to be said around focusing and getting hard on specific issues, where solutions can be replicated. I think that's very, very insightful. Alain, I want to come back, just building on some of those responses. The unique strength that philanthropy brings, you had mentioned agility, kind of the first mover that can take that initial risk. Walk us through from AFD's perspective, what that looks like and how you're trying to leverage that unique role that philanthropy could potentially play in addressing these more kind of focused issues.
Well, yes, thank you. I think if I may take two examples, one in Egypt and one here in the region. And the one here in the region would be the Aga Khan Foundation, which you may know. It's the relationship with the Aga Khan Foundation is actually quite interesting. And I think how it works is that the Aga Khan Foundation brings the project. So that's the first step. Then it's also a beneficiary. Then it's also a funder. I mean, it does co-finance with us. And then it's at the verge of private sector philanthropy and doing, some public sector work. Because one thing we haven't said, until now, is that, but I'm sure it has been said this morning. I was in a panel and listening to someone saying that, is that the philanthropies also do some kind of public work. I mean, all the social aspects. Sometimes they fill in for the government. And so having a partner that actually talks all the languages, of the beneficiary, of the project bringer, of the partner, of the financiers, it helps. So now the question, of course, it's easier to work with big foundation like this, or with, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with whom we're working also. But how do we tackle, because we've said that, and I think the ambassador said it very clearly, that we need to go on the ground, and we need to work with, smaller local foundation and come together and be pragmatic together in order to implement and make it happen and discuss, communicate, bring strength, around the table so that it can happen. And this is where we're having an issue, is that it's okay to work with the bigger foundations that we know. We sort of talk the same language. The challenge is really to talk with the smaller foundation. And so in order to do that, for example, now we're going to partner with Wings, and hopefully that will, take us to the next level where we can reach out and discuss, because I think what you say, Ambassador, is absolutely right. And someone said it this morning, I see Sarita, who is here. It's all about the people. It's all about the people, and it's all about people around the table who are going to make it happen, and who are going to be open-minded enough to understand the limitations of each other in order to make it happen. So the other example I have is in Egypt, where we're working with the Race Foundation, which is an Egyptian foundation, and it's really embedded on working with the youth and working with those who are left behind. That is, the street children, who are roaming the roads of Cairo. And working with that foundation is really key, because basically what we're doing is that we're co-financing with them. They're bringing a part of the financing that, of course, we're leveraging. And so those children gets to have a future, hopefully, and it's a holistic approach where the children are taken care of psychologically, they're trained with a job, and this collaboration has been going on for more than 6 years now, and hundreds of children and young adults have been taken care of. With the Aga Khan Foundation, of course, we're talking about putting, working with the hospitals and in the region. Actually, it's not limited to Kenya. It's in Tanzania, it's in Uganda, it's in Kenya, it's in different parts of Kenya, it's in Kisumu, it's in Mombasa, it's here in Nairobi, and working on putting centers of excellence regarding cancer, infectious diseases, etc. So it's really things that we shouldn't have been able to do if it wasn't, teaming up and working together in order to make it happen.
And thank you. In preparing for this panel, I was trying to weave in different plugs for the Aga Khan Foundation, so I really appreciate it. But genuinely, we've always been thrilled with the partnership with AFD, and I think we might be able to tackle ghost hospitals as well, just an idea. I think you brought up a couple of points, and I commend AFD's leadership and foresight of partnering with Wings to cast a wider net on engaging philanthropy beyond kind of the big ones that we know well. They play a pivotal role, but there's many around this room as well that are also playing a consequential role. Expanding that reach, I think, is a very good case study to follow. Abdi, I would like to come back to you. You raised a number of excellent points which have been kind of reinforced throughout this dialogue, and I think it's appropriate to ask this question of the banker on the panel. But how are we measuring this? A lot of good conversations, but how do we intend on measuring the impact of this collaboration? Are we looking at interest rate changes? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Whenever you hear this question is directed to the banker, you wonder if it's a good question. But I think it's a very, very important point in the sense that, when we talk about, for example, in Absa, a very important part of the scorecards that we use for boards and management does actually include this aspect. We measure it quite specifically. You connect it to number of lives and people impacted. I saw today in the sustainability launch of Safaricom, they did something amazing, which is not just directly impacted, but looking at their wider network and really seeing the total impact of what they are doing. So I think this whole idea of measurement and evaluation is quite important. One of the things we do in Absa is we have a program called Ready to Work, which helps young people who are trying to get into either becoming their own startups or getting a job, and helping them and preparing them for that. We started it as ourselves, but it has since grown with other partners coming in. And last year, we did a program with the government of Kenya, which impacted 20,000, young people. So it's about measuring and making sure we are driving it. But I guess it could always be better. And one of the things that I think about a lot is how do we ensure the impact beyond our immediate scope is covered as well? How do we work with more of the SMEs and small businesses that we work with to drive impact, to that level? How do we partner more and ensure that we are driving the impact and we are measuring it correctly? So I would say the way to measure it is lives impacted, and to look at how we work with the philanthropy community as well. And that will require a transformation of thinking from a banker's point of view, because I see what the community-based organizations do. It's fairly specific, responding to certain scenarios, not necessarily responding with all the data, and bankers will come at it with 1,000 questions about the data, the evaluation, the impact, and so on. So it will require a bit of change in the way that we approach it as bankers. But certainly, I think measuring it is what will make it, and putting the ambition out there. Today I spoke there, a few other larger banks, spoke at the event, and everybody spoke about the need, and I think Ambassador just mentioned it as well, the need to be much more ambitious and to think very, very differently from the way that we have thought about this in the past, and then put the measures in place and continue to evaluate it, as we move forward.
I think that's quite powerful, because what we've seen is data can be certainly a force that can convene multiple actors. I'm hearing that. I think contributing to a common goal, and I just want to echo that last point, we need to be considerably more ambitious with where we want to be heading, and I think that can also enable the crowding in of many others. So Machi, I wanted to come back, and that journey of collaboration that the Tony Elumelu Foundation went through, and identifying a lot of different challenges will require a lot more hands and different types of hands. How do we also design those collaborations to address some of the barriers that you might have found? Over the course of these past couple of days, power has come up, and power imbalances have come up. And how do we move beyond that in a productive way and create a bit of an equal playing field here?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Riaz. I think that, given the work that we do at the foundation, our primary constituency is young people, young Africans. We've been able to train over 1.5 million young Africans so far in business management training, because we realize that even if we can't fund every single person that applies to our annual program, we can give them business management training and invest in their capacity so that they go on and start businesses. But in terms of the power imbalances that you've talked about, I think that realizing, one, that we're in this game of philanthropy to create large-scale impacts and not for our own personal benefit or agenda, helps to clarify issues and helps to, really streamline the priority scale. We started this foundation in 2010. It was started by Mr. Elumelu, whom I'm sure many people in this room know, one of Africa's largest investors, and the chairman of the United Bank for Africa, so another financial services giant on the continent. Well, he started the foundation based on his own life experiences. So Mr. Elumelu grew up in Africa, went to school in Africa, Nigeria to be specific. And he started a normal job like any other young man in Nigeria. But then he would always tell us the story about how he applied for a bank role even when he wasn't qualified. So the bank role needed 2-1 honors. So 2-1 honors in Nigeria means maybe closer to a first-class degree. And he had a 2-2, so that's the next grade point below the 2-1. And the bank role had the criteria saying, don't apply if you don't have this academic qualification, yeah? But Mr. Elumelu went on to apply, and following his application, he wrote a little note. So he says, I know that I may not have the academic grades you want, but trust me, I'm diligent, I'm hardworking, and if you give me a chance, I'm gonna prove you right? And so when they were going through all the applications for the thousands that applied for that role, the managing director of the bank at the time read Mr. Elumelu's note and was intrigued by the courage of this young man to not qualify, but still apply and still attach a note to the application. And so out of, I think, 5,000 applications, Mr. Elumelu was one of 10 chosen for the role. And he started his job that way. And today, he's now one of Africa's most influential investors and philanthropists. But he never forgets that story about how somebody believed in him even when he wasn't qualified. And that's essentially what we're doing at the Tony Elumelu Foundation. We want to democratize luck. We want to welcome all young Africans who believe they have a business idea that can transform the continent. We're not looking at your track record. We're not looking at your academic qualifications. We're not looking at none of that. We have a transparent application. You go online to our website, you apply for our program, we interview you afterwards, we listen to you pitch your idea or your business to us, and we choose you. There's no other agency or institution democratizing luck on the continent at the scale that we're doing. And we do that because of Mr. Elumelu's own personal experience. And so to us, the topic around power imbalance is strange, quite frankly, because our reason for being is to democratize luck. is to share that power, is to give opportunity, to create economic hope when none exists. And and we do this through working with our partners, but through working with our entrepreneurs as well, listening to them, listening to their stories, finding out how to scale, measuring and also tracking all of our impact so we know how many jobs are created every year, we know the revenue generated by entrepreneurs every year, we know the challenges that they're facing, and we know their ambitions for the next stage of their businesses. And finally, I think that as philanthropic actors, sometimes we're too streamlined on our own objectives and we don't bring in governments enough. And so what we do at the foundation is also collaborate with African governments, because even if we fund entrepreneurs and train them and mentor them, if the enabling environment is absent for them to thrive, then our work is incomplete. So we need to engage government to create new taxes, tax laws that accommodate startups, create policies that are consistent, that supports small businesses, and create the infrastructure, the power, the transport linkages, the bridges, the road networks, etc., for these SMEs to scale. So we don't see the work that we do as one actor-led. So it's a mix of philanthropies, a mix of multilateral development agencies, a mix of governments, a mix of academia, and bringing best practice across the public, private, and development sectors to empower our startups. And then the last thing we've learned in this journey is the importance of governance. So we come to philanthropy with a private sector mindset. So we're not in a business of doing philanthropy as business as usual. So we want to bring the competitiveness of the private sector, the governance framework, the accountability, the transparency, so that our philanthropy is not, it's not something we do for the short term, but is able to be sustained for generations to come. I would be very disappointed if after my tenure, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, dwindles in scale in the next 50, 100 years. Our work is to make sure that this is a philanthropy that's in Africa, affecting and impacting African lives for the very, very long term. And so we can only do that by putting in place the right governance, the right board, and ensuring that our monitoring and evaluation processes are sustainable and helping us track and monitor our impacts and our results.
Sumachi, I think that quite an interesting case study, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and I think what I'm hearing is that a really focused, concise vision, backed with, frankly, a lot of empathy of our primary shareholders, if I could use that term again, can be a rather powerful force in addressing power imbalances right at the outset. Partners coming in are coming in with that vision in mind, and I think that it sounds like the experience of your foundation has really sidestepped that power conversation and just got on with the work, backed with the monitoring, the data, the iterations. Just pressing on this transparency and accountability piece, though, Ambassador Whitman, you come to us with a rather rich experience in the private sector. And transparency and accountability are terms that are no strangers to private sector leads in the American market and indeed globally. And it's certainly, I'm sure it's echoing in your current role as well. What does that really look like for philanthropy organizations? What are your expectations, your aspirations around this space that we should be really reflecting on as well?
Well, thank you for that question. I think virtually everyone in this room has been focused on metrics of one kind or another. There's not any philanthropy initiatives today that don't have some metrics associated with them. And I think that's a very positive change. I think that the most important thing, as I try to bring a little private sector learning into my current role, is around what are the right metrics. And what we've tried to do is take every county in Kenya and understand, 10 or 15 different metrics where each county stands, because there's no one Kenya. There's different, Bomet is entirely different than Nairobi. And we need to take that into account as we think about how to deploy the funds at USAID. And then you have to say, what metric is the most important that we're trying to help move? And it always has to start with benefit to the people that you're trying to aid or serve. And But I always start at the top. What are the economic indicators? You know, GDP per capita, income per capita, education achievement, maternal health. There's sort of a series that I'm sure you all, you know, are almost standard that you want to look at. And then how are we going to move those in each area? And then I keep coming back to focus. Focus, focus, focus. Because if we are not moving these metrics much faster, as I said, in the next 10 years, we're by definition falling behind. But I'll give you a very good example. So, at least in Kenya, it's been very difficult to move maternal death rates down. They've been basically flat for the last 15 years. Enter Tanzania with a program called M-Mamas, which is effectively Uber for pregnant mothers. That what you do is you enlist vehicle transport of any different kind, private cars, private matatus, boda-bodas, and they all sign up, if you will, to be Uber drivers for pregnant mothers. And so if there is a woman who is out in the village and you know, goes into labor, she needs to get to a hospital right away. And this has been very hard. Now, all of a sudden, there's probably someone with a transport vehicle next door that can take her to the hospital. And paid for, at the moment, by the Tanzanian government and some philanthropists. This has dropped maternal death rates in Tanzania by 37%. Okay, let's go do that in Kenya. And so we're really focused on how do we expand a program like that as fast as we can to as many counties as we can through government funding, USAID funding, and other philanthropies. So when there's a good idea, like how fast can we implement that idea? And that's a little bit, my observation, that's a little bit counterintuitive to the community, which is, well, maybe we need to look at it, maybe that was an anomaly, maybe there's, you know, some unique thing about Tanzania that's not going to apply to Kenya. There's 1,000 tales in the naked city about why it's not going to work in the next place. And let's get to work and see if that is true. In fact, we've now rolled it out here in 2 counties, 37% decrease in maternal death. It's great.
Incredible, Ambassador Whitman. Indeed, I mean, that is an outstanding statistic, and I mean, you're right. Sometimes we're faced with incredibly inspiring solutions and we try to poke holes in them. And unclear why the human condition wants to do that all the time. But I think it's certainly a point of not only self-reflection, but self-accountability as well. Our unique value proposition as philanthropy is sometimes speed, as Helen has rightly mentioned, and our agility. And how do we work past our own internal, frankly, sometimes bureaucratic systems to accelerate a solution that we know will cause the impact that we want to see. Just want to do a time check. All right. He's actually running the panel. So, you know, we have some additional questions, but I just wanted to pause and canvass the room. You know, our job is to ensure that we're answering that question, and one way that we can do that is just by opening it up to 2 to maybe 3 questions from the audience today. So, sorry, I've got a bit of a blind spot here because of the podium, so apologies if there's a hand behind this podium, but if we can get some mics around. Is there actually? Oh, that's Murphy's Law then.
There is
okay,
a hand behind the podium.
Oh, like all the way in the back. That is that's the pinnacle of blind spots there. Okay, so we'll start there, and I saw one in the middle here, and hopefully we can get one on the far side of the room. So I trust you have been equipped with a microphone. Name, organization, and let's keep it to questions. We've all been to conferences where a question quickly turns into a comment.
Yes, so then from Access Now, I was actually interested to hear more from the lady in red, apologies, I forgot your name, about when you said that the philanthropy, it's interesting that the philanthropy sector could adopt some business or some corporate approaches and tactics. I would appreciate if you can answer this question in light of the rights-based approach in the development sector and in light of the competitive-driven, little concern about harm and lack of interest and willingness of the capitalist system that runs the world and dictates and guides the way corporate sector works. How do you think we can make a fine balance with this? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Samachi. I believe that's coming to you. We'll take one more question as well. I think there was a hand. Yep, there we are.
Good afternoon. My name is Nico, and I run the Future Society, which is an AI governance nonprofit. We work every day with OpenAI, with Anthropic, with DeepMind, and my question is to you, Ambassador Whitman. You've painted the backdrop of a sense of urgency versus demography. You've also worked for years in building algorithmic-powered payment systems and digital services. You know, as I do, that AI is here and is transforming things at lightning speed. This is, sorry for my language, freaking me out. When I look at how Kenya needs to adapt quickly now, before we pull the carpet before their feet, because we're automating coding and many other things now. So software skills could become obsolete. So I'd like, based on this incredible intersection that you have between private sector, technology, and indeed your role as an ambassador, well, there is a summit in London where this is going to be discussed under the aegis of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. What do you think? And because some of the things I've heard today, I heard them 10 years ago. We need to move faster. So how would you approach that? And what sense of urgency do you have vis-a-vis the rise of AI? Thank you.
Thank you for that. We could take one more, and then we'll divvy these questions up. Yeah. 2 questions only. All right, let's see what we can do with these 2. Somachi, sorry. Elena, what would I do without you? All right, here we are, number 3. Please, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Maurice Omondi. I come from Kenya, working for CPF Foundation. I would like to direct this question to representative from Barclays Bank. How best do you think corporate foundations in Kenya and even other funders can be brought together to focus, like Ambassador was saying, either to go to a region or to focus on a particular topics? Thank you.
Great question. That one's coming to you, clearly, Absa Bank. Let's go in the order that they were raised and try to work through them. Somachi, the notion of business practices, the hardness of driving for results, how do we balance that with also some of the negative aspects of being a bit too corporate-minded? How do we navigate that tension there and apply the best of it into our philanthropy software moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think that, that question, and it was asked with such force and such commitment, I think it's an important question. And I agree with you. I don't think that capitalism, in the way it exists, works for the world anymore. I don't think that it constitutes a fairer, more equitable, more just society. And I agree with you 100% that we need to change capitalism to address the needs of the 21st century. And that's why at the foundation, we don't believe in capitalism as the world knows it. We believe and subscribe to a philosophy called Afri-capitalism. And Afri-capitalism simply means that the private sector takes the lead in developing the African continent and investing in priority key sectors for the long term. So Afri-capitalism calls for business investments in a new way. So a way that you make economic profits for your business, certainly, but also in a way that ensures economic prosperity in the communities and the countries that you're working in. So we don't believe that business and CSR are separate. We believe that you can make economic profits for your shareholders, at the same time create a more prosperous community for your stakeholders. And so that's the work that we do at the foundation, where we're democratizing luck and giving funding and training and mentorship and coaching to thousands of businesses every year across the African continent. At the Earth Holdings Corporate, which is the business side of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, we invest in sectors on the continent that are transforming lives, even as we generate economic profit. So for instance, we're investing in the power sector in West Africa. We know that power is still a huge challenge on the African continent. I think 1 in 3 people on the continent don't have any access to power at all. We can't talk about economic prosperity or economic transformation or even SME empowerment if we don't have electricity. How can our children go to school and learn meaningful meaningfully if there are no lights to power their schools? How can we reduce maternal mortality, as we discussed, if there are no lights to run our hospitals? So we can't even begin to talk about business or SME or philanthropy if we don't even have some of this infrastructure like power in place. So at the Tony Elumelu Foundation, we're part of the Heirs Holdings group that is investing actively in the power sector in West Africa. We are now one of the largest generators of electricity in West Africa. And yes, we're getting good economic returns, but I think more importantly, we're now generating electricity in marginalized and very vulnerable communities that didn't have any access to electricity before now. And so that's a new way of capitalism where we're doing business for good, where we're in business for the long run, where we're not in business to extract, but we're in business to develop and to grow and to prosper side by side with our stakeholders. So in a nutshell, I totally agree with you. I don't think capitalism works in a way that we've known it hundreds and decades of years before now. And I think that we subscribe to this philosophy of Afro-capitalism, and we encourage everyone on the continent and beyond to look at business in a new way.
I think that was extremely well said.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Afri-capitalism.
Exactly.
I think that ought to be a focus session in next year's WINGSForum.
Oh, yeah.
And unpacking that. There we go. Ambassador, I think it's not going to be a panel in 2023 without AI coming up. So thank you for that, and I think it's an important question. And if I could just build on it whilst the ambassador addresses this question, but how does philanthropy stay ahead of innovation and spur that innovation further in a way that is also values-driven as well?
Well, let me make a couple of observations. Observation number one is, if you think back over the last 100 years, there's been enormous times of disruptive innovation. Okay, let's go back to the train, the automobile, the airplane. You can think about the first computer, the IBM 3600 back in the 50s and 60s. Then you think about the PC, you think about the internet. Then you think about scientific disruptions, vaccines, mRNA vaccine platform. There's a small number of these incredibly disruptive innovations that changes everything. I'm going to tell you AI is one of those. We should not underestimate the change fundamentally across every organization, every way we do business, every way we interact. This is a ginormous, disruptive innovation. And I think that the way to think about this is every organization is a tech organization today. Agriculture is a tech business today. Banking is definitely a tech business. Philanthropy probably needs to be more of a tech business than it is. And so my advice to folks in this room is walk and run, do not walk, to embrace this new technology. Don't be scared of it. There will be negative effects of this, but there will be many more positive effects. I think it will be a tremendous dislocation in the kind of work that you all do, in the kind of work that you invest in for young people. Think about call centers for a second. We think in Kenya, call centers, business process outsourcing is a really great opportunity, but in 5 years it might not be. Because you think about call centers, that's going to be AI driven, and it's going to be better than human beings. If you think about radiologists reading x-rays, you think about so much in the medical profession, it's going to be replaced. So how do you think about what is the next generation of employment? What's the education that's required for what I think is going to be one of the biggest disruptions? To answer your question about how philanthropy can drive innovation, I'm not sure philanthropies are going to drive tech innovation, in my humble opinion, but you can embrace it faster than anyone else. And you can pioneer how this changes what you do. And to the extent that you're thinking about Africa capitalism, there's a shot to just leap over. I love what M-Pesa has done here. M-Pesa went from cash to the largest mobile money network in the world and skipped over every other thing. AI is this kind of dislocation. So I just encourage you all to not be scared. There will be some bad effects. There'll be some bad things that happen. But by and large, this is coming to your organization and it's coming fast. So you might as well embrace it, not try to hope that it doesn't ever happen. Because it's going to happen and it's going to change everything.
Oh, indeed. I mean, 3 out of 5 of these questions were generated with ChatGPT, Ambassador, so it is here.
So listen, I wrote my comments using ChatGPT.
There we
No,
go.
I didn't.
This whole panel has been...
But I have to give, I'm giving a speech next week in Dakar. I actually asked ChatGPT to write my speech. And you know what? It's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it better. It's going to be my own. But
To your staffers, I would be feeling very uncomfortable right now.
yeah, like I may not need any staffers.
Abdi, Absa Bank plays a big role in the financial market here.
How can it bring the other banks together? And I was just with the CEO of DTB this morning, so
Yeah.
you let me know.
Yeah, I think, and also there was a bit in the question around how do we focus the impact on a few areas that matter. I think certainly at an individual foundation level, that is improving. We came from a place where you got applications from all over the country for different initiatives, different schools, different hospitals, tree planting, etc. And you went and participated. And yes, all good. It happens at the community level, but then you lose the focus, you lose the impact. I think increasingly you see the individual foundations focusing on a few big thematic areas, environment, education, health, etc., and then trying to do it with impact. There's still a few reactive, cases, and those will always be there. You have to deal with issues as they come, but the impact is becoming bigger and much more focused. I think the next step, which is really where the impact lies, is all of us coming together and saying, where should we focus? Is it a thematic area? Is it a geographic, as Ambassador was saying, specific county or region? And then trying to make that happen. And we saw certainly during the time of COVID that we were able to do that. I was in Tanzania at the time, and we picked some of the core areas that required support at the time around, masks, gloves, medical equipment, etc. And we came together, not just as the banking industry, but private sector. And there was a massive effort to say, this is what we need to focus on, and then put all the resources there. I think the experience is there, the desire is there, and I think that's really the natural next step that we need to take so that we have greater impact and greater partnership.
Yeah.
Abdi, thank you. And I think that comment also echoed something I heard yesterday around no egos and no logos, and driving resources around a specific concern. And we saw that a lot during COVID, and I think that's right. I'm getting word that we got to wrap this up, and I want to give Hélène the last word. And Hélène, your call to action for this group here as we wrap up, and some individuals taking flights back to wherever they came from, some individuals a shorter trip. What do you want them to be thinking about as they walk out of this room this afternoon?
Thank you. Difficult question to answer. I think Ambassador has given us a way forward already in terms of AI coming our way. But if I sort of summarize the discussion today, I think there are two big pillars. Of course, one is the money, but the other one is the people. And so, yes, the AI, yes, the means and ways to do things. These are how to make it happen. But the first thing is the people and how people get together around the table to make it happen. And as for the money, I agree with you, Ambassador. We're not getting more money than actually the flows of ODAs are decreasing, but there is still money around. And I think philanthropies are a great way to get additional money that was not on the market before, and to go and dig in those pockets, because we had a discussion this morning in terms of there are not so many African philanthropies, but there is a lot of money going around. Their communities are helping each other. The families are helping each other. One of the person was saying there was a lot of money which was given to the mosques and the churches, etc. So there is money around. And so how do we tackle this money to bring it to the table? And I think this is what we really need to focus around. The people to make it happen, and the means to make it happen. And the means would be AI, would be, of course, the money, would be, the processes to be decreased, the no more logos, etc. But it starts with the people wanting to do it and to go in the same direction.
Ellen, thank you. I feel like I outsourced my job to you in a way, but that I could not have summarized this panel better. A round of applause for our panelists this afternoon. So let me hand it back to our MC, I believe.